Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of week 3. We're going to be going into presenting techniques. I'm hoping to finish by introducing you to a couple more residents here at Rubicon. But before we do that, we've got a bit of content to cover. So I'm going to be sharing a few YouTube clips that are relevant to our topic on techniques for presenting. But to begin, I'm going to show you a video, very short video, on a few what not to do's.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered? Raised.
Here we go. And of course, the availability of other investment opportunities to consider, and that's actually it.
I'll come out and I'll do a bit of, a few gags and stuff, and then I'll go, right, you have to be thick-skinned in business. It doesn't matter if you're the T-boy or the general manager. People will try and rock your confidence and shake your spirit. Do not listen to them, yeah? Let's try a little exercise. Then I'll just go into the audience and I'll pick on someone at random. I'll just go, you, sir, what's your name? Say your name. Leroy. Where's Leroy come from?
Now, I will need to go through all the projected earnings for each quarter based on statistical forecasting, and I'll be doing this by showing you the PowerPoint slides and graphs. Now, I know this might not be that interesting to you, but it is something I feel needs to be done for you to fully understand where the company is heading now.
Welcome to the greatest presentation ever by Akash Baru. Today, this presentation will change the history of mankind.
In conclusion,
So after today, hopefully there'll be no presentations like that. So let's get into it, and then I'll introduce you to some other little critters that live here. So our focus area for this session is how to present, and I've broken that down into 4 main areas. So the first one is your personal appearance, so dressing the part. Then we'll move into body language, and I've got a couple of I've got a different clip for each section, but a clip specifically on hand gestures and using your hands while speaking, and then we'll touch on a few other body language techniques, so ways to engage your audience. I'll then show you a clip on tools for using your voice, so how to use your voice in a really engaging and enticing way, how to help make people listen. And finally, we'll wrap up with props, costumes, setting the scene, and jumping into the role that you're taking on for your presentation. So personal presentation, it says a lot about a person, and depending on what your professional situation looks like, depends on what professional looks like. Obviously, as guides, dressing in suits and ties isn't appropriate, but there's still a level of professionalism that needs to be followed. So why dress professionally? Well, first of all, you want to look like the expert. By looking like the expert, your audience are going to know who's in charge, they're going to know who to direct their questions to, they're going to want to listen, and they're going to be engaged and trusting of you from the get-go. You got to remember that you're representing an organization or a company, so your first impressions definitely matter. So dressing professionally might mean wearing a uniform, or it might mean you choosing what you wear, but dressing the part and looking professional. We're going to touch on a few more things. So how to look the part. Depending on what role you're taking on during your presentations depends on how you're going to dress. So when I talk about getting creative, that could mean you taking on the role of a backcountry ski guide or a park ranger or a botanist who works in a particular park. I want you to take on whatever role is suited to your program, and I want you to dress for that role in the most professional way you can. It's really important that you are culturally aware during your presentations. So if you're going to be touching on content specific to traditional owners and custodians of the land, Indigenous Australians, then you need to understand and know how to be culturally sensitive. Okay, so does that mean starting with a welcome to country? Or does that mean speaking differently as a male towards females and as a female towards males? Taking photos that can sometimes seem culturally insensitive. So there's a lot of different elements when we talk about being culturally aware. As an outdoor leader, as a guide, as someone who takes people on different trips, you're going to be working with a whole range of different people from different backgrounds. And in our questions for assessment task 1, when we looked at demographics, overseas demographics, depending on what country they come from, visitors come from, depends on their backgrounds. So religious beliefs, cultural backgrounds, and traditional practices can change how people perceive cultural awareness. And what's insensitive to one person or to one culture may not be to another. So it's really important that you understand your demographic. So if you start working in a particular area and there's a really high demographic of people from a particular area, then you want to become familiar with how to be culturally aware. But in regards to this, when we're talking about Australian Indigenous content, it's really, I would encourage every single one of you to go and do the 1.5 hour course that I put up. I put the link on the Facebook page. It's currently a free course. I've done it. It's definitely well worth doing, especially with our engagement with different people and going and visiting different places. But being culturally aware, especially when it comes to Indigenous Australia, is really important. So it's up to you whether you decide to do a welcome to country, but if you're going to do it, there's a particular way to do it. How do you recognize the traditional owners of the land that you are speaking about? It's amazing content. It is amazing content to share and to talk about, but you want to do it in a culturally sensitive way. I want you to own the role you're taking on, and that ties into dressing for the role that you're taking on. So own it, take on that persona, be that person. And this is all about knowing your content and being confident in what you're speaking about. All right, body language. So I have a clip to show you to do with body language and how to use your hands while speaking. Now, Kelsey Toner, the guy who owns Be a Better Guide, he has a whole website dedicated to teaching people and training people in different practices when it comes to being a guide. Definitely a great resource, definitely some really great videos and content, and I'm going to share just this one with you today.
Hey, do you ever feel like this?
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
Be good just to hold them down by your side. Yeah, great.
Well, we were real happy with what was going on, and at the end of the day, you got to be happy.
Well, if you sometimes feel like Ricky Bobby, then we're here to help. Hi Hi, Kelsey Toner here from Be a Better Guide, and in this video we're talking about hand and arm gestures. Now, using these movements allow speakers to be more memorable, to communicate more effectively, and of course, build a greater connection with your audience. Studies consistently show that speakers that use hand gestures have their audiences remember up to twice as much as what they're saying. Another very interesting study done by the science people reviewed all of the most popular TED Talks and all of the least popular TED Talks. And after reviewing thousands and thousands of hours of video footage, they found that the least popular TED Talks used an average of 272 hand gestures for the course of 18 minutes. The most popular, almost double, 465 hand gestures as an average, and this is from hundreds of different speakers and different topics. Coincidence? We think not. So if you want to tap into the power of effective hand gestures as a tour guide, stay tuned. Well, first and foremost, we've got to find our base posture. Now, if you're like Ricky Bobby off the top and you're not quite sure what to do with your hands, you might be wondering, well, how can I do a hand gesture? I don't even know where I'm starting from. So this exercise is for you. What I'd like you to do is look up into the sky, straight above you, raise your hands up and do a nice big stretch. Reach as high as you can, and then let your arms fall just naturally. Now, look down at your hands, and this is your base posture. While it may not feel the most comfortable, it actually is going to appear the most natural to your audiences. And oftentimes, this is just naturally where our arms want to lay. So when we're thinking about hand gestures, we want to be starting from and then returning to this base posture. Our second tip is to stay inside your box. Now you might be wondering, well, what box are you talking about? Well, we're going to draw an imaginary box together. It starts from about your shoulders and goes down to the bottom of your waist, just about belly button. And it extends out, just about to your wrists. And so the vast majority of your gestures and hand movements should be within this imaginary box. If you review the most popular TED Talks of all time, most of their gestures are falling within this box. If you go above it or in front of your face or sometimes too low, this often comes across as out of control and just distracting. Now, every rule can be broken, and sometimes we want to go outside of this box, maybe for exaggeration, or if we want to use humor and be a little bit wild in our motions, like there was an explosion or something like this. But just know, for the most part, we want to be keeping our gestures inside of that box. So now let's look at 4 important types of gestures that every tour guide should have in their toolbox. The first is the give, and it looks very much like this. Your options for today's lunch are the chicken or the beef. As you can see, the motion is holding the hands open like this, palm facing upward. Now this is great because it is offering information or offering choices, right? Now it can be used during a list that we want to tell them this, but then we're also going to tell them this and tell them this. So as tour guides, we're always communicating information and stories and interesting facts and figures. So you'll probably be using the give quite a bit. Another type of gesture you'll want to use is called the mime. So great storytellers will often act out the verbs that they're using when telling their stories and in their sentences. So a simple example might be when Michelangelo was carving the statue of the David, every day he went out and chipped and polished and chipped and polished and chipped and polished for 100 days until it was perfect. Or after killing the king, the assassin ran along the ramparts of the castle and dove into the moat, never to be seen again. So as you can see, we're reinforcing our verbal communication with nonverbal communication. Another type of gesture we'll want to use is called the show. Now, this is a large category of gestures where essentially we're trying to visually represent the idea that we're saying. A couple simple examples would be just a little bit left. We'll often do that sign. We might say there are 4 big choices we have to make in our life, or the president had 2 daughters. Anytime we can represent a number with our hands or fingers, we'll often want to do that. We might say something like, there are 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. Or it was a big problem, or I felt so sad. You know, we often touch this sort of part, we demonstrate that feeling or that sadness. So as you can see, we're not acting out the verb so much as creatively representing what we're saying. And one final type of gesture you'll want to use is called the chop. Now, this is used to deliver a strong message or add emphasis to certain parts of your story. And basically, it looks just like this. The prince only had one thing that he needed to do. Right? You can chop with one hand, you can chop with two hands. Sometimes when you're telling multiple pieces of information, we might say, this was what happened in the 1800s, this is what it was like mid-century, and then this is what happened at the turn of the millennium. Remember that the bigger the chop, the more emphasis you're going to add. So we could say, the mayor getting elected was the greatest thing that could have happened to this city. And that's going to add a lot of emphasis. By practicing the techniques that we shared in this video, you're going to be communicating more effectively, you're going to be gesturing with purpose, and being more memorable for your audiences.
Hopefully you found some of what Kelsey said to be, quite beneficial. Like I said, he's got a heap of other really great videos, so feel free to check out his YouTube channel or his website, beabetterguide.com. All right, so we'll move on to continue with body language, just a little bit more to go. So a few additional things to remember with our body language. A smile can say a lot about a person, and a smile can go a long way. So remember, you're trying to create relationships with your audience. You're trying to create connection with them so that they'll listen to what you have to say. So remember to smile and make it a genuine smile too. Don't over smile, don't under smile, but just a genuine smile when you're chatting with people, sharing content and talking. Looking people in the eyes for some people when presenting can be quite daunting. Now, obviously we're starting with video presentations, but all these tips and tricks are relevant to all of your engagement with clients. So giving safety briefings, meeting clients, taking groups on hikes, wherever you end up in this career, being able to speak in front of groups is really important, and body language will say a lot, okay, and add a lot of benefit to you and your program. So looking people in the eyes. Now, you don't want to awkwardly look at someone for too long, but you also don't want to be looking over people's shoulders, looking at the ground, or looking up at the sky, or reading off your notes. So to look people in the eyes, if you're looking down at your notes every now and then just as a prompter, that's fine. And then when you look up, you want to connect with someone's eyes, whether it's for half a sentence to a full sentence, any longer, and maybe it'll be seen as a little bit awkward, but move your eyes from person to person. So have a look at your notes, look up, connect with someone, finish your sentence, move to the next person and continue. Facing your audience while speaking is really important as well. Sometimes we get carried away with our content and we're looking around and we're talking about certain things that are around us, and what do you know, you've ended up with your back to the group and you're still talking. So remember to share what you've got to say. And if you need to move or turn away to walk towards something, then do that once you've finished speaking. Then once you've resumed position in your new location, then you can start speaking again. But something to always remember, face your audience when you're speaking to them. And don't continue to speak while you're moving. So you want to share some content, stop speaking, move, resume position, and start sharing again. If you want your group to move with you, make that really clear before you start moving. All right, guys, that's everything I want to speak about on this topic. Follow me, we're going to move over to our next location, and I'm going to share some interesting information about that. All right, so make it really clear, we're going to move from point A to point B, and ensure that you finish that before you start moving. All right, moving on to using your voice. A very powerful tool that you have, and I'm going to show you just some of a really great TED Talk TED, as well as beabetterguide.com. I want to link you with TED. I'm sure most of you are familiar with TED Talks, but they're really, really great. There's some amazingly captivating and informative TED Talks out there. And this is just a segment of one that I thought was, quite powerful in regards to tools with how to speak and use your voice.
So hail. Also, now that's what you say, and it's like the old song, it is what you say, it's also the way that you say it. You have an amazing toolbox. This instrument is incredible, and yet this is a toolbox that very few people have ever opened. I'd like to have a little rummage in there with you now, and just pull a few tools out that you might like to take away and play with, which will increase the power of your speaking. Register, for example. Now, falsetto register may not be very useful most of the time, but there's a register in between. I'm not going to get very technical about this for any of you who are voice coaches. You can locate your voice, however. So if I talk up here in my nose, you can hear the difference. If I go down here in my throat, which is where most of us speak from most of the time. But if you want weight, you need to go down here to the chest. You hear the difference? We vote for politicians with lower voices. It's true. Because we associate depth with power and with authority. That's register. And we have timbre. It's the way your voice feels. Again, the research shows that we prefer voices which are rich, smooth, warm, like hot chocolate. Well, if that's not you, that's not the end of the world, because you can train. Go get a voice coach. And there are amazing things you can do with breathing, with posture, with exercises to improve the timbre of your voice. Then prosody. I love prosody. This is the sing-song, the meta-language that we use in order to impart meaning. It's route one for meaning in conversation. People who speak all on one note are really quite hard to listen to if they don't have any prosody at all. That's where the word monotonic comes from, or monotonous, monotone. Also, we have repetitive prosody now coming in, where every sentence ends as if it were a question, when it's actually not a question, it's a statement. And if you repeat that one over and over, it's actually restricting your ability to communicate through prosody, which I think is a shame. So let's try and break that habit. Pace. I can get very, very excited by saying something really, really quickly, or I can slow right down to emphasize. And at the end of that, of course, is our old friend, silence. There's nothing wrong with a bit of silence in a talk, is there? We don't have to fill it with ums and ahs. It can be very powerful. Of course, pitch often goes along with pace to indicate arousal, but you can do it just with pitch. Where did you leave my keys? Where did you leave my keys? It's a slightly different meaning in those two deliveries. And finally, volume. I can get really excited by using volume, sorry about that, if I startled anybody, or I can have you really pay attention by getting very quiet. Some people broadcast the whole time. Try not to do that. That's called sodcasting. Imposing your sound on people around you carelessly and inconsiderately, not nice. Of course, where this all comes into play most of all is when you've got something really important to do. It might be standing on a stage like this and giving a talk to people. It might be proposing marriage, asking for a raise, a wedding speech, whatever it is. If it's really important, you owe it to yourself to look at this toolbox and the engine that it's going to work on. And no engine works well without being warmed up.
Hopefully from that you find some really useful tools on how to project and use your voice efficiently when you're presenting. We're going to move on now and look at props, costumes, and setting the scene. So using props, they can be really beneficial to a speech in adding emphasis. So here's an example of someone who used props to enhance his what he was trying to get across, and that was a speech about coal. So I guess there's some parameters around how to use props, but you only want to use them if they're relevant to what you're talking about. if they're going to be impactful to the message you're trying to get across or the information that you're trying to share. If they're going to enhance what you're saying, so maybe it's a particular message you're trying to get across, and by sharing and showing and passing around props, you can emphasize and have more impact. But you need to be mindful. Is the prop that you're using or the visual aid that you're sharing, is it big enough that everyone can see it if you hold it up? Or is it able to be handled and passed around? There's a few things to take into consideration with that, and that is the amount of people in your group. If there's a huge group that you're working with and your program is only going for a certain amount of time, then having something to hand around, is it going to get to everybody by the time you move on to show them something else? So you've got to be mindful about passing things around. One idea around that is working with a group, and if you've got props, then do you have multiple props? So a few of the same thing that you can pass around to different people within the group. So maybe you put one at the far right, one in the middle, and one to the far left. And those props, by the time you finish what you're talking about, hopefully everybody has handled one of that prop. So lots of things to think about with them, but with them and with these video presentations, think about what you can hold up, what you can hold up to the camera, what you can show, or using pictures, even using backgrounds so that you can take us to a place. So really be creative with your props. Props can even be costumes, which is what we're going to move on to next. So where possible, I want you to get into costume or get into the role of who you are. So if you are you and you have a particular job within that national park, then dress as that particular role. So a park ranger, maybe you're talking about snakes. Can you get your hands on a wide brim hat and a collared shirt, khaki green pants or a khaki shirt? Think about what is stereotypical of the uniform of the person that you're trying to portray or the role that you're trying to take on. A mountain hiking guide. Are you an outdoor adventure expert? Which adventure sport are you talking about? How can you dress to take on the role as the guide or the leading expert in that particular adventure sport? Setting the scene. So this can help take your group or your audience to where you're talking about. All right. If you're talking about wombats, can you take us inside a burrow of a wombat? Can you set your background or one of your visual aid slides, maybe your first one, set the scene. Where are we? Where are you taking us? Maybe you've got an overarching map that you can show us. And you can say, we're going to be starting in this location, and then we're moving to this location, and we're going to finish up in this location, using a map as your starting slide. But setting the scene is really important. I want you to, if you are taking on the role as an expert in the field at whichever national park you're talking about, and you're creating credibility for yourself as the leading expert, and you've dressed professionally to take on that role, then own being the expert, set the scene and take us there. Using props, using costume, and setting the scene with visual aids or backgrounds or maps, it's going to have a real impact on your presentation and captivating your audience as well. All right, so summing up today's session, we touched on personal appearance and dressing professionally, taking on a role and dressing in that role. Using body language to engage your audience, what you can do with your hands while you're speaking to a group, and then looking at some other things. So not moving while you're speaking, facing your audience, using eye contact and smiling. Little tips and tricks for speaking and how to use your voice to engage your audience. He had some really great points there, but that was just a small snippet of a much longer video. So please go back and have a look at any of those videos, beabetterguide.com, TED Talks, and yeah, I'll share some others with you in future content videos. And finally, we wrapped up with some props, costumes, and setting the scene. So hopefully today's session has been helpful and help you think about how you can really get your presentation jazzed up a bit and really engaging. So hopefully you found it useful, and yeah, please reach out if you've got any questions or concerns, or you want some further information on any of this contact. All right, on this content, sorry. So I'm going to take you and show you a couple of the other animals that live here. Hey guys, I'm back in the enclosure where all the animals live. Well, not all the animals, but some of them. Mainly reptiles in here. And I want to introduce you to Boots. And Boots got his name because of the pattern on his skin. So Boots is a diamond python. And he'll soon be going into hibernation because it's getting cold. But Boots is about 2 meters long. You can see him curled up there in the tree and up on the shelf. And he eats around 12 mice a year, and those 12 mice are eaten usually in about a space of 4 or 5 months, so in the warmer months. And then he goes into hibernation and yeah, doesn't consume much during that time. Usually moves around a little bit and he's poking his tongue out, but he's pretty chill. I think the computer might be a little bit concerning for him. But anyway, so Boots is, like I said, 2 meters in length. He eats about 12 mice a year. And yeah, I think he's been here for about 4 years. And I believe he's fully grown as well. But yeah, this is Boots, and he is a diamond python. All right, I'll just close his enclosure. He did poke his tongue out and move a little bit more, but I wonder if any of these guys will be out. There's also 3 tree frogs that live in here. Maybe on our next video, I'll get the frogs out. They're a lot of fun to play with. Jumping all over the place. They climb up on you and yeah, try and escape a little bit, but they're a lot of fun. And there's a couple of, you can see who we've got in here. There he is. So this is Bluey. He's a blue-tongued lizard. And he's pretty quiet. We get him out sometimes and feed him out in the open space and have a bit of interaction. But all these animals, if they weren't rescued, they were purchased as pets. So they're part of an education program that takes place here, where they teach kids about, here's the life cycle of the food. So all these containers are the life cycle of the food that they feed some of their animals. And so they feed, I can't show you that. They feed and grow different animals till they get their worms for feeding. These are what we feed Priscilla. There's a few mealworms that you can see in there. All right, so I'm going to finish today there, and hopefully you got a lot out of the presenting techniques and from the videos. And feel free to go and check out some more of those videos on YouTube. I'll also send out the slides, which will have some of those links, and then yeah, you can rewatch them as you please. All right, hit me up if you've got any questions about presenting or about your presentation specifically. Otherwise, I will see you in our Zoom sessions. Okay, bye for now.